Welcome to video number 2 in PCUSA Elder Training. Now we're going to get specific. What does each council do exactly? First is the session, the most local council, which is made up of elders elected from a congregation and the ministers of word and sacrament serving that congregation, who together take up the care, nurture, and governance of that particular congregation. I want to refer you to the first document on page 1 in your packet, and let's break that down a little bit. I want you to look for the verbs in that first paragraph. Governing and guiding are the primary responsibilities of the session, but not just for the sake of power or keeping folks in line. We govern and guide so that the congregation is and becomes a community of faith, hope, love, and witness. From the wider Presbyterian tradition, we also receive governance and guidance in the form of the items listed here: the marks of the church, the notes that identify Reformed and Presbyterian churches, and the 6 great ends of the church. We'll go over those in the next video, but for now I want to keep us focused on what we're doing, because this list gets more specific. The session, in particular, is responsible for 3 things. First, providing that the Word of God may be truly preached and heard. This includes providing space in which we worship and learn together. It includes the care and feeding of your minister of word and sacrament, outreach to the community in the form of evangelism, justice work, and ecumenical ties. These are all things that the session is responsible for, in that the session is responsible for making sure that they happen in an appropriate and directed manner. This is a big job, and this is why we have committees, and why each committee reports directly to the session. Aside from the nominated committee, the Book of Order does not specify which committees we have or how we organize them. There is no longer any document that says what our committee structure has to be. Fun fact, at one point, the Book of Order was twice the size that it is now, and was very specific and very prescriptive about how the church should be organized and run. In 2012, they completely overhauled the Book of Order and gave local congregations so much more freedom to organize themselves in a way that works for them. The second thing on that list is providing that the sacraments may be rightly administered and received. This one is far less complicated. The session decides when and how the sacraments are administered and to whom. This is why we approve communion dates and why the session approves all baptisms. This also includes a reference to the Directory for Worship, which is another part of the Book of Order, which gives guidance specifically on how and why we worship God together. Interestingly, this bullet point also includes pastoral care as an extension of the sacraments. We can't truly come together in unity at the Lord's table when we're angry at each other, when someone has unheard grief, when the people we love are missing. We can't truly receive the gifts of baptism when we've got folks bickering in the back about how much water we've used. Finally, we have the call to nurture the covenant community of Christ. This is touching base with the folks that we've lost contact with, updating the membership rolls, providing programs that teach us how to be God's people together, encouraging generosity and stewardship, providing for the building, etc., etc. This is the nitty-gritty work of ministry in this time and place, which we do either in committees or in a group. But one important thing to note in this list is that if something isn't covered by a committee or specifically delegated to a member of the staff, that responsibility doesn't just vanish into thin air. It instead comes back to the session. Next up, we have the presbytery. The presbytery is a regional council made up of the ministers of word and sacrament and ruling elders representing congregations within a particular geographic area. It's important to note that elders and ministers have exactly the same standing at presbytery meetings. And for the most part, presbyteries do try to achieve equal numbers of elders and ministers. The presbytery is not, as I've heard said before, a union for pastors. Congregations are meant to be equally represented in the presbytery so long as they actually show up and participate. I want to invite you to pause and take a look now at page 2 in your packet. This is the list of specific responsibilities of the presbytery as a council of the church. It will look very similar to the list of responsibilities for the session at first glance, but the presbytery fulfills those goals in different ways. For example, the presbytery's responsibility to oversee the creation, merger, and dissolution of congregations, as well as approving and disapproving and dissolving pastoral relationships within those congregations, falls under provide that the word may be truly preached and heard. There are also several points where the presbytery is directed to provide resources for local congregations so that they can thrive as they do ministry. The presbytery is also charged with the pastoral care of its members, specifically ministers of word and sacrament, and the congregations within their bounds. Again, in letter C, we get to the nitty-gritty of this particular council's ministry. Ordinations, installations, reining in the pastors who go off the rails, providing for discipline of ministers, helping congregations navigate conflict, creating and sustaining mission-focused relationships on that larger regional level. The final two councils that we have in the PCUSA are the Synod and the General Assembly. The Synod is a larger regional body consisting of a group of presbyteries, represented, once again, by minister and elder delegates, whose primary role is to provide resources and opportunities for conflict resolution to the presbyteries. The General Assembly is our giant every 2-year national denominational assembly, where presbyteries, again, send elders and ministers as representatives to help make decisions on behalf of the entire denomination. Only the General Assembly can make changes to the Book of Order and the Book of Confessions, which together create the Constitution of the PCUSA. These are our primary governing documents. You've already heard from the Book of Order, and in the next video, you'll hear from the Book of Confessions. As you've probably gathered as I go through this, I want to emphasize the role that ruling elders play beyond the local congregation. Elders are represented at every single level of our denomination, in keeping with the belief that every person had God-given gifts to share. We are governed by ministers and elders together, and that means that those higher councils, above and beyond your session, need you too.